So I want you to imagine you're watching um, like a massive skyscraper being built right in the middle of a really busy city.
Oh, like a huge construction site.
Yeah, exactly. You see the heavy steel girders being hoisted up into the sky, vast sheets of glass being installed, tons of concrete being poured.
Right, the usual chaos.
Right. But now imagine if when the building was finally finished and they cut the ribbon, you realized that the construction workers, like the actual entities who lifted the steel and poured the concrete, were completely invisible.
That would be a little unsettling.
Totally. I mean, they did all that exhausting heavy lifting without breaking a single sweat, and they were like entirely unchanged from when they started, ready to just walk right across the street and build another skyscraper.
It sounds like a complete physics-breaking illusion,
It
honestly.
really does. But in the chemical world, this is a fundamental reality.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is happening all around you, and actually even inside of you, right this very second.
Yeah, and that's exactly what today's deep dive is all about. We are looking at chemistry's quiet matchmakers.
The unsung heroes.
Exactly. We're going to understand how these invisible facilitators speed things up, how they build our industrial world, and, why finding new ones might be the only way to scale the green tech we so desperately need for the future.
Because without them, modern life literally wouldn't be possible.
Right. So we call these invisible workers catalysts. And, well, I know the basic textbook definition of a catalyst is a substance that speeds up a chemical reaction without being used up by it, right?
Right, that's the classic definition.
But it really helps to visualize what that actually means, on a day-to-day level. If the ingredients of a chemical reaction are just floating around, what is the catalyst actually doing to them?
So a great way to visualize it is the analogy of a matchmaker.
Okay, a matchmaker.
Yeah. Think about two people who might be like an absolute perfect romantic fit. They could eventually meet just by wandering around a crowded city, but it might take years of pure random chance.
Just bumping into each other at a coffee shop or something.
Exactly. But a matchmaker introduces them directly. They set up the date, they smooth over the awkward introductions, and they just get them together quickly.
That makes sense.
And crucially, the matchmaker doesn't join the couple.
Well, that would be weird.
Right.
No.
They step aside, completely unaltered, ready to introduce the next pair.
So because they aren't consumed in that process, just a tiny amount of a catalyst can facilitate like millions of chemical reactions?
Millions, yeah. Sometimes billions.
But translating that from human dating to molecules, I mean, these chemicals aren't just wandering around looking for love. They're physically bumping into each other.
Yeah.
And they need a certain amount of energy to actually react, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to a really foundational concept called activation energy.
Activation energy, okay.
Right. Most chemical reactions, even ones that naturally want to happen and will release energy,
Oh.
they don't just happen the instant the ingredients meet. Well, molecules have these electron clouds that repel each other. To react, they have to smash together hard enough to overcome that repulsion. The existing chemical bonds in the ingredients have to be forcibly broken before any new ones can form.
So you can picture it almost like two valleys separated by a steep, high hill.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The chemical reaction wants to roll from the high valley down into the low one, but it has to be pushed all the way up and over that peak first.
Right. And if that hill of activation energy is incredibly high, the reaction is just going to crawl along.
Because it's just too hard to get over.
Yeah. At normal temperatures, only a tiny fraction of molecules will happen to bump into each other with enough kinetic energy, like enough sheer momentum to clear that peak. Most of them will just bounce off each other harmlessly.
I've always pictured a catalyst in this scenario as like a VIP fast pass at a really crowded theme park.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like it doesn't change the layout of the park and it doesn't change which ride you end up on, but it massively lowers the barrier to entry so a huge flow of people can get through instantly.
That's a really good analogy.
But mechanically speaking, how does a chemical fast pass actually lower that hill?
Well, at a physical level, a catalyst provides an entirely different pathway for the molecules to interact. For example, a solid metal catalyst might offer a very specific surface for gas molecules to bind to.
Like a landing pad.
Kind of, yeah. And when a molecule attaches to the surface, its internal bonds are physically stretched and weakened by the pull of the metal's electrons.
Oh, wow. So with the bonds already weakened, it takes vastly less energy to break them apart.
Exactly. It's essentially doing the heavy lifting of prying the molecule open.
That's incredible.
Or, in other cases, the catalyst might grab two different molecules and hold them in the exact perfect orientation.
So instead of just hoping they collide randomly at the perfect angle,
Right. Instead of relying on random chance, the catalyst acts like a mold, aligning their reactive parts perfectly. By physically organizing the pieces or stretching their bonds, the energy required to trigger the reaction just plummets.
The hill is essentially tunneled straight through.
Basically,
It
yeah.
makes complete sense when you break it down like that. It's not magic, it's literally just holding the pieces in the right position or weakening the tough spots so they just snap together effortlessly.
Exactly. And nature actually relies heavily on this exact mechanism.
Right, which brings us to biology.
Yeah.
Because if we look inside the human body, catalysts take on this highly specialized form, right?
Yes. They're called enzymes.
Enzymes.
Yeah, enzymes are biology's ultimate matchmakers. They're mostly complex proteins, and they're folded into these incredibly specific three-dimensional shapes.
So they aren't just generic.
No, not at all. Unlike a general industrial catalyst that might speed up a whole bunch of different reactions, an enzyme is usually tailored for one very specific target.
Oh, interesting.
It has a physical pocket, which we call an active site, that fits its target molecule perfectly.
Like a key sliding into a very specific lock.
Exactly like that.
So, okay, wait. If you eat a really big meal, say a turkey sandwich, there isn't just one generic digestion enzyme doing all the work in your stomach.
Oh, far from it. That level of generalization just wouldn't be efficient enough for a living organism.
Really?
Yeah. There is a specific enzyme tailored to break down the starches in the bread, a totally different enzyme shaped perfectly to grab the complex proteins in the turkey, and another one dedicated entirely to the fats.
Wow, so it's a whole specialized crew.
Exactly. And when the protein molecule slides into the enzyme's active site, the enzyme actually changes shape slightly to hug it tightly.
Oh, it grabs it.
Yeah, we call this an induced fit. The enzyme physically strains the chemical bonds of the protein until they literally snap. That's what breaks the large molecule down into smaller amino acids that your body can actually absorb.
I've always wondered about the timeline of that process. I mean, if someone didn't have these enzymes in their digestive tract, would that turkey sandwich eventually break down into usable nutrients just sitting in, stomach acid?
It would eventually break down, yes, but you would be waiting years.
Years. Just for one sandwich.
Literally years. Your stomach acid helps, sure, but without enzymes like pepsin actively grabbing those protein chains and forcing their chemical bonds to snap, you would basically starve with a full stomach.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the timeline of human survival just simply cannot wait for random molecular collisions.
Right. Life operates on a much tighter schedule than chemistry normally allows.
Exactly. Enzymes accelerate biological processes by a factor of millions and sometimes even trillions.
That is hard to even wrap my head around.
Right. What would take a decade in a sterile beaker happens in a fraction of a millisecond inside a cell.
Wow. I mean, think about the massive energy demands of like a sudden sprint. You see your bus pulling away, you break into a dead run, and your leg muscles need this immediate, massive spike in energy.
Right, and the enzymes in your muscle cells are grabbing sugar molecules and snapping them apart to release energy in that exact millisecond.
It's wild. We tend to view ourselves as these solid, static beings, but we're really just trillions of catalyzed chemical reactions happening continuously.
We really are. If those molecular fast passes stopped working, the whole biological system would just freeze right in place.
Okay, so seeing that breathtaking biological efficiency naturally led human beings to try and replicate the trick, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If biology uses specialized folded proteins to lower the activation energy hill, industry figured out how to use specialized metals and synthetic materials to do the exact same thing for manufacturing.
I guess it comes down to scale and economics, right?
Correct.
Because in a massive chemical plant, time and energy dictate whether a product is even viable to make.
Right. If refining crude oil into usable fuels or plastics requires heating massive vats to thousands of degrees for weeks on end, the end product becomes entirely unaffordable.
So you have to find a shortcut.
You have to. And a vast share of the chemicals and materials that modern life depends on are made in processes that rely heavily on human-made catalysts.
And the sources point to a perfect illustration of this, right? The production of synthetic fertilizer.
Yes. This is arguably one of the most consequential chemical processes in human history. It's known as the Haber-Bosch process.
Right. Because it basically solved a massive bottleneck for global agriculture. Plants desperately need nitrogen to grow, and, our atmosphere is absolutely swimming in it. It's, what, about 70% nitrogen gas?
About that, yeah. But for a long time, humanity just couldn't tap into it.
Why is that?
Because atmospheric nitrogen is incredibly stubborn. Two nitrogen atoms are locked together by a triple covalent bond.
Such a couple bond.
Yeah, and it is honestly one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature. Plants cannot break it apart to use it, which is why farmers historically had to rely on manure or mined nitrates to enrich their soil.
So the activation energy hill for breaking that triple bond manually was
Yeah.
just insurmountable on a global scale.
Right, you couldn't just heat the air up enough to snap the nitrogen atoms apart without spending an absolute fortune on energy.
Okay, so how do we fix it?
Well, that was the reality until the early 20th century when we finally found the right industrial matchmaker, an iron-based catalyst.
Iron, just regular iron.
Especially prepared iron, yes. When nitrogen gas and hydrogen gas are pumped under high pressure and heat over the surface of this iron, the metal physically interacts with the nitrogen molecules.
So it's that landing pad effect again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The surface of the iron pulls on the electrons in that stubborn triple bond, weakening it.
Wow, it's exactly like the enzyme hugging the protein to strain the bond, but on an industrial scale using metal.
The mechanism is functionally identical, and once the iron surface weakens that triple bond, hydrogen atoms can easily swoop in, attach to the separated nitrogen atoms, and form ammonia.
And then we use that ammonia to mass-produce synthetic fertilizer.
Yes, we do.
So by just introducing an iron surface that physically pries the nitrogen molecules apart, we unlock the ability to pull fertilizer directly out of thin air.
It's quite literal, yeah.
It's just staggering to realize how much of the global population is currently fed simply because we figured out how to lower that one specific chemical hill.
It really is. It is no exaggeration to say that this catalyzed reaction is a hidden pillar of the modern economy.
But you don't have to look to massive agricultural foundries to see industrial catalysis in action, right?
Oh, no. There is a very high probability you have a highly advanced chemical reactor sitting right in your driveway right now.
The catalytic converter.
Yes.
You know, people usually only mention them when discussing car theft because they contain valuable precious metals. But for a long time, I didn't actually realize those metals like platinum, palladium, rhodium are actually functioning as chemical matchmakers for the car's exhaust.
Oh, they are. They are absolutely essential for keeping urban air breathable.
How so?
Well, when a car engine burns fuel, the combustion is never perfect. It produces toxic byproducts like carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and unburned hydrocarbons.
Nasty stuff.
Very. And as those hot, toxic gases are pushed out of the engine, they flow through the catalytic converter, which contains this really intricate ceramic honeycomb structure.
Oh, I read about this. That honeycomb structure is designed specifically to maximize surface area, right?
Exactly.
Like they take a tiny amount of precious metal, maybe just a few grams, and coat it over this massive internal geometry. If you flattened out the honeycomb inside a single catalytic converter, the surface area would be roughly the size of a football field.
A football field, exactly. And that massive surface area is crucial because the toxic gases have to physically touch the metal for the reaction to happen.
Right.
As the exhaust rushes over that platinum and palladium coating, the metals physically trap the toxic molecules.
Okay, so what do they do once they trap them?
Well, for instance, the metals physically rip the oxygen atoms off the harmful nitrogen oxides, holding onto the oxygen for a split second, and then they basically force it onto the carbon monoxide.
Oh, wow. It's an incredibly fast atom swap.
It is.
It forces the highly toxic carbon monoxide to take on another oxygen atom, turning it into carbon dioxide, which is, much less toxic to breathe.
Right. And at the exact same time, the nitrogen oxides are reduced to harmless nitrogen gas.
And this complex molecular dance happens in the, fraction of a second it takes the exhaust gas to travel down the tailpipe?
Just a fraction of a second, yes.
Yep.
And because the platinum and palladium are merely facilitating the swap, they aren't reacting themselves or being consumed by it. A single converter can continuously scrub toxic exhaust for hundreds of thousands of miles.
It's just a beautiful symmetry. I mean, the exact same mechanism lowering the barrier to entry so a reaction can happen at lightning speed is digesting our food, feeding the entire planet, and cleaning the air in our cities.
It's universally applicable, yeah.
But moving from the present into the future, the sources point out that finding new catalysts is actually the primary bottleneck for solving some massive existential challenges.
That is very true. The hunt for the next generation of catalysts is arguably the most important field of modern chemical research right now.
Really, the most important.
If we want to transition to a truly green economy, absolutely, we need more efficient ways to manipulate molecules.
Like what kind of technologies?
Well, finding better catalysts is essential for technologies like clean hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen burns completely clean, producing only water, but extracting hydrogen by splitting water molecules currently requires a massive input of electricity.
Right, so we need a catalyst to lower the hill so splitting water doesn't cost more energy than the resulting hydrogen fuel actually provides.
Exactly, the math has to work out.
And the same logic applies to capturing carbon directly from the atmosphere, right?
Yes, precisely. If we find the right matchmaker, we can trap atmospheric carbon quickly and cheaply, rather than relying on massive, energy-hungry industrial scrubbers.
But the texts highlight a pretty harsh reality here. Taking a promising catalyst from a laboratory discovery to a global industrial solution is agonizingly slow.
It is. It really is. And this is the crux of the engineering challenge.
Why is it so hard to scale up?
Yeah.
Is it simply because a laboratory is perfectly controlled, but an industrial factory is, messy, massive, and unpredictable?
You hit the nail on the head. Let's say a research team synthesizes a brilliant new catalyst in a sterile lab. It works perfectly in a small glass reactor using highly purified water and ideal temperatures.
Right.
But industrial chemistry doesn't happen in small glass reactors.
No, it happens in massive steel vats under extreme pressure, dealing with ton after ton of raw, unpurified materials.
Right, so a delicate catalyst that works miracles in a pristine lab environment usually just gets obliterated when you subject it to an actual factory.
It just degrades rapidly.
It degrades incredibly fast, and the physical mechanisms of that failure are a major hurdle for scaling green tech. For example, under the extreme heat of a continuous factory reactor, a highly porous metal catalyst might suffer from a process called sintering.
Sintering, what does that mean?
It means the microscopic structures on the metal literally melt and clump together.
Oh, man. And if they clump together, you lose all that crucial surface area.
Exactly. If your football field of surface area melts down into a solid lump, there is nowhere for the molecules to bind, and the chemical matchmaking stops entirely.
That's a huge problem.
And if it's not sintering, you face the problem of catalyst poisoning.
Poisoning. Wait, does that mean impurities in the raw materials are actually reacting with the catalyst?
It happens constantly. Industrial raw materials are rarely perfectly pure. If you are pumping industrial gases over a precious metal catalyst, trace amounts of impurities like sulfur or lead can bind permanently to the active sites on the metal.
Oh, so they just get stuck there.
Yeah, the sulfur acts like superglue inside a lock. The active site is permanently blocked, the catalyst is rendered blind, and the reaction just grinds to a halt.
And you suddenly have a multi-million-dollar reactor filled with useless metal.
Exactly.
Well, that perfectly explains the bottleneck. It's not just about finding a material that lowers the activation energy hill.
No, it's much harder than that.
You have to discover a material that lowers the hill, survives being blasted with extreme heat for months on end without melting, doesn't get jammed by trace impurities, and ideally isn't made of a precious metal so rare that it bankrupts the company trying to scale it.
Which is exactly why experts in the field preach patience. We are asking engineered materials to perform incredibly delicate molecular surgery while surviving inside an absolute inferno.
That's a tall order.
It is. The breakthroughs in green catalysis are real, and they are happening, but engineering them to survive global industrial conditions requires really rigorous, painstaking iteration.
It frames the entire physical world in such a different light. I mean, we started by looking at this abstract concept of a matchmaker, a substance that eases the path, physically orienting molecules or stretching their bonds so that incredibly sluggish reactions can happen at lightning speed.
And we trace that invisible worker from the folded proteins and enzymes that replicate our DNA and digest our food, all the way up to the massive industrial foundries that pull fertilizer from the atmosphere and the honeycomb structures scrubbing the exhaust beneath our cars.
It really is the quiet trick that keeps both biology and human industry functioning. The barrier to entry for the chemistry of life and civilization is naturally just too high. Catalysts are the only way we get over the hill.
They make the impossible practical.
They really do. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible forces that shape our reality.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
But before you go, I want to leave you with something to consider. Think about the massive hunt for green catalysts we were just talking about. If a lab somewhere in the world were to discover, say, a highly durable, really cheap catalyst for capturing carbon directly from the air tomorrow, just one new molecular matchmaker could instantly rewrite the future of our climate. It makes you wonder, what other impossible chemical reactions are out there right now, just waiting for the right invisible worker to come along and make them a reality?